This video contains spoilers for Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
So I just watched Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I get it.
I'm on the hunt down after you.
We sure have been spoilt with all these handsome anthro-canine characters recently, haven't we? Though I think this is the first time I've ever seen death personified as an anthro-wolf. But I'm definitely not going to complain.
Seasons don't fear the reaper.
I mean, yeah, I know wolves were used as a symbol of death in ancient Greece and Rome and of course in Norse mythology, though I think that was more to do with chaos and destruction than actual death. I guess the closest thing I can think of a wolf being a personification of death would be the Grishki from Welsh folklore, especially since they're often depicted with blazing red eyes. Though I would like to think that within the Shrek universe, it's probably mostly based on German folklore. Though technically speaking, the wolf is a recurring antagonist from children's fairy tales. You know, Three Little Pigs, Little Red Riding Hood, The Wolf and the Seven Little Kids, and of course The Boy Who Cried Wolf. And let's not forget the whole wolf in sheep's clothing thing. This would imply that there is more than just one big bad wolf, and maybe this death is just one other one. Wolves often being depicted as evil, vicious, cunning and rapacious, bloodthirsty killers. Death is not evil necessarily, which is another reason why I believe that this version of death within the Shrek universe is not a literal anthropomorphic wolf but is a shapeshifter instead, which would also explain his ability to appear and disappear like a phantom or some kind of hallucination. But the wolf can also symbolize loyalty and strong family ties, good communication and education, understanding, and of course intelligence. All of these things, I would argue, are portrayed within the character of Death. So I would also argue that the wolf has been misaligned as villainous, being portrayed as simply cruel and cunning and nothing more, or nothing deeper than that. But then of course if I have to also bring up the story of Little Red Riding Hood, where the wolf is used as a symbol of aggressive carnal nature of man. I mean, using wolves to represent this kind of behaviour has been a thing within media and even animated media since the beginning of animation. So I would argue this has been a thing since the beginning of cinema itself. Though yes, wolves were symbols of death in ancient Greece and Rome and were associated with Hades, the god of the underworld, funnily enough.
Because I always somehow manage to find a way to reference my favourite character ever in every video I make.
This is the first time a wolf has been depicted as death personified in media, though I'm sure someone in the comments will prove me wrong there. I made a point of stating in my video about the Disney Hercules episode, Hercules and the First Doctor, that death isn't evil. So when I saw in the trailer that Death was going to be the literal antagonist in this movie, I was concerned. Okay, so technically speaking, we have Death, Jack Horner, the Three Bears and Goldilocks as the antagonists of this movie, not just Death itself. But I think it goes without saying that Death is the most intimidating out of all of the antagonists put together. Death being the only character out of the whole cast who wasn't going after the wish. But since Death itself is a neutral anthropomorphic personification, it would make next to no sense for Death to have any form of desiring self-gratification, and let's face it, that just wouldn't be as interesting to watch if he was just another character that was after the one wish. Death within the Shrek universe appears as an anthro wolf wearing a black riding cloak with a hood and razor sharp sickles. He is a sadistic and thrill-seeking character who takes pride and pleasure in his job. Unlike other personifications of death, like the one in Family Guy, where they consider themselves to literally be stuck in a dead-end job. No, I will never apologise for that pun. This personification of death actually enjoys his job and admits to enjoying striking fear into his victims, taunting Puss in Boots with a very creepy melodic whistle. Even his very presence strikes fear into Puss. To me, I believe in the Shrek universe, Death is a shapeshifter and appears as a white wolf to Puss, as that may be what Puss himself fears the most. Purely because, in my opinion, I don't particularly like the idea of Death being literally personified as an anthro wolf. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like this design. What I'm saying is, I believe this is how Puss sees Death, not how Death is actually personified as within the Shrek universe. I think every single character will see Death in a different way. Though, like I said, Death itself is not evil, Death is inevitable. Death in this movie is more punishing Puss for his arrogance and recklessness, taking life for granted, so Death concludes he no longer deserves his final life and therefore decides to kill Puss before he wastes his final life. At the beginning of the movie, Puss states that he's never been touched by a blade, and then during the first fight with Death, Death actually causes him to bleed, communicating with the audience that though this movie is technically set within the Shrek world, this movie is taking a tonal shift in regards to its attitude toward death. It's making it clear that characters can get hurt and literally die in this story. Though yet, obviously, technically that is the case within the Shrek universe, but what I'm trying to say is that they're treating death as a serious theme here, instead of treating it with light reverence. Death believes life to be sacred, and is of course disgusted by Puss for his disrespect toward it. Though he does prefer a fair fight, so when Puss does lose his sword, Death slides it back to him and orders him to pick it up. He believes life is worth fighting for, so when Puss finally actually faces Death later on, Puss actually returns the statement when he does cause Death himself to lose one of his sickles. Puss is up for a fair fight as well, and slides the sickle back toward him and instructs him to also pick up his weapon. I can completely see why people were absolutely, or still are, absolutely obsessed with this character. The design itself as an anthro wolf is awesome. The really exaggerated long snout especially is intriguing. I mean, of course he had to have a wolf's grin. Baring one's teeth in a knowing, mischievous grin is often considered to be flirtatious in nature. I'm sure the furries out there got a real kick out of this. I mean, admittedly, when I first saw the trailer before we learned that this is actually Death, I kind of assumed that this was supposed to be the big bad wolf, but that's kind of stupid because... What? But then they do have the three bears in this movie, and, you know, they appeared in the first three movies, and I think Mama Bear was even killed by Lord Farquaad, so I'm not entirely sure if these three bears are the same as these three bears, or... I don't know, just go with it. I also appreciate that they didn't turn Death into a joke. This character is genuinely scary to me, which he needed to be, in order for us to understand why Puss was so scared of him. He's not necessarily scared of death itself. He's scared that he hasn't lived his life to the fullest. That's something that I think we can all relate to. Being everyone's favorite fearless hero isn't actually as fulfilling as he first believed it to be. I've said before in other videos that animation, especially animated content for children, sometimes sugarcoat the theme of death by having a character quote-unquote die and then they're brought back to life because of magical tears and other kind of bullcrap like that. I'm so glad that that didn't take place in this movie. Even though in Shrek 3, the death of the king was treated in a rather tasteless way, I just find it interesting that so many different personifications and representations of death within media are still so varied. It's so fascinating. And this one is definitely a standout version for me. Not just because he's an anthro wolf either. He's mysterious, he's intimidating, but he's also a lot of fun. The scenes where Puss and Death are fighting, this is incredible. Basically what I'm trying to say, as the thumbnail said, is I get it, okay? I get why people were so obsessed, and still are so obsessed with this character. It's been a while since I've come across a character that has had this much of an impact on me. I'm Mad Munchkin. Stay creative.